The secret scene in comic book films has become a staple of the genre. While Marvel Studios was not the first to introduce a post-credit scene in films, they have certainly popularized it by including one in every single film they've ever done, with the exception of Avengers Endgame. Big Daddy Kevin Feige has stated the concept of the secret scene was influenced heavily by the cult classic Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Now, our audience does skew a bit younger, so if you haven't seen it, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is about a high school slacker who skips school with his best friend and girlfriend for a joyride around Chicago, and it's most notably known for Matthew Broderick's regularly breaking the fourth wall to speak directly to the audience. The final scene after the credits ended saw Broderick telling the audience the movie was over and it was time to go. However, Kevin took that concept and adapted it to the general concept of cliffhangers or sneak previews, something comics had been doing for decades within their books. As the mainstream MCU gained steam and audiences caught on, it became a driving force in viewer attendance. Honestly, even to the detriment of some projects, Marvel was happy to add sneak peeks and Easter eggs into the next big adventure in every single film, much to the excitement of my wife, who asks me, "Who is that?" every single time we go and see one of these films. Some films have a single scene, while some have multiple, with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 holding the current record for 5 secret scenes. As Marvel's success grew, other studios and properties took note and began including their own secret scenes with hopes of establishing the same level of hype towards their upcoming next projects. But not every film is a hit, and some secret scenes never lead anywhere as the franchise dies, and you have to lie to your kids and say like, hey, Green Lantern was great, but he went to live on a farm upstate, and you will never see him again. Today, we are going to take a look at a few scenes that led to absolutely nowhere. Since I've already brought it up, let's start with one of the most infamous comic films of all time, 2011's Green Lantern, a movie universally panned by both critics and audiences. Green Lantern is ripe for Twitter's revisionist history policy, where they take a bad film and they say it's a misunderstood masterpiece. There are a ton of videos on why Green Lantern was a failure, so I don't really think I need to recap that or dispute it, but despite knowing the state of the film, the studio was still confident enough in it to allow DC to put a post-credit scene in the film. In the scene, Sinestro, the most well-known and popular Green Lantern villain, was shown obtaining the Yellow Lantern Ring. Obviously, this implies that the sequel would have dealt heavily with the concept of the Sinestro Corps, a separate Lantern Corps that harnessed the power of fear for their lanterns rather than willpower. However, the sequel was never greenlit, as shortly thereafter Man of Steel came out and the process of trying to build the Snyderverse began. The film barely broke even, and Green Lantern, one of my personal favorite superheroes, was buried as a franchise pretty much to this very day. Quite possibly one of the most perplexing secret scenes that never panned out was Baron Mordo's scene from the first Doctor Strange. The origin story for the master of the mystic arts, Dr. Stephen Strange, ultimately saw Strange and Mordo disagree on the methodology used to defeat the film's big bad Dormammu. Mordo renounces his sorcerer career and departs, but shows up in the secret scene to kill a magic user, John Pangborn, a man who studied magic long enough to heal his body and then dipped. The secret scene implied that Mordo was preparing to wage war on the many sorcerers of the world, as his comic book counterpart had done for decades. However, the next time we see Mordo is simply a variant of him, Baron Mordo, who's the acting sorcerer supreme of another reality within the multiverse. Despite these two facing off one-on-one in the film, the fight literally ends when Doctor Strange parkours his way out of a pit and Mordo just doesn't chase after him. Seriously, rewatch the fight. That's how it ends. Will the main MCU universe's Mordo show up in a third Doctor Strange film? Who knows? But we do know a lot of the films showing up between now and the end of Phase 6, and a third Doctor Strange isn't one of the ones announced yet, so if they do make a third one, Doctor Strange and the Mordoverse of Madness is my pick for a title. You can have that one, MCU. That one's free. Shazam! Fury of the Gods is dropping soon, and while many people expected Shazam's next villain to be the post-credit scene hinted Mr.Mind, from the first film, when the trailer dropped, we were greeted by a bunch of new made-up characters. That's right, the characters that Shazam fights in this upcoming film are completely made up for just this film. This hero has decades of characters to pick from, including Mr.Mind, who, was already set up at the end of the original Shazam, and instead we're getting the Daughters of Atlas. And I'm not saying that Mr.Mind is a strong enough character to carry a whole film, but at this point I've read every appearance of the character, and I think they could have made him pretty menacing. Speaking of Shazam characters we aren't going to see again, let's discuss how the hierarchy of secret scenes was about to change, but then it actually didn't at all. Black Adam quite possibly produced the most hype secret scene in the history of DC Comics films that the internet basically ruined a week before the movie dropped in theaters. The mid-credit scene for Black Adam shows the titular Man in Black staring down Henry Cavill's Man of Steel, and I truly believe in my heart that there's a reality out there in the multiverse where this movie gets made, and after its release, it successfully ushers in an era of world peace unseen before it. In this reality, money is abolished, all healthcare becomes free, we explore the cosmos and became embraced by the Intergalactic Federation of Worlds. But, back in our reality, Black Adam lost more money for Warner Brothers than the entire budget of the unreleased Batgirl film. Audiences' lack of familiarity with the character mixed with the general fatigue of superhero films and the looming complete DC Cinematic Universe reboot all contributed to a low performance of a film that not even Dwayne Johnson could save. Michael Mando of Better Call Saul fame played infamous Spider villain Mac Gargan in the mid-credits scene for Spider-Man Homecoming. We can clearly see Gargan posturing with Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, for more information on Spider-Man's secret identity. While the future of Spider-Man in the MCU is a complete and utter mystery right now, it would be awesome to see Scorpion among the mixed. I guess technically this cameo could still play out, but it seems like the franchise has lost sight of the character considering there are now 2 sequels to Spider-Man Homecoming and neither had anything to do or showed any mention of Mac Gargan whatsoever. The Justice League was a film so bad I don't want to admit that it exists, so I'm going to pretend it does not. Instead, I choose to only acknowledge Zack Snyder's Justice League. Zack Snyder's Justice League is probably the most infamous comic book film of all time. There was a time myself when I didn't believe that the film exists or it would ever see the light of day, but after years of persistent fan requests, HBO and Warner Brothers gave Snyder the financial means to revisit his magnum opus / swan song. The post-credits scene for Justice League saw a now-free Lex Luthor sitting on a yacht that's about half as big as the yacht that Garrick and I purchased, being famous YouTubers. Shown coming aboard the yacht, if you can even call it that, was Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke, a villain we have seen multiple times in TV shows but never in a major motion picture. Undoubtedly, Joe's take on the character in future DCEU projects would have been awesome, with Deathstroke being the potential villain in Ben Affleck's Batman solo film, as well as having a possible 4-episode miniseries written and directed by Gareth Evans, but sadly, as Ben Affleck leaves the DCEU, so did all the plans for Deathstroke. And the last film I wanted to discuss was Hellboy, a film that's just about horrible in every single way. Look man, I've been a Hellboy fan for quite some time, and I have a pretty high tolerance for, awful comic book films, but Hellboy took the cake, and since seeing it in the theater, I haven't considered giving it a second viewing. It was that bad. It is astounding to me that the studio believed the film might do well enough to earn a sequel. So well, in fact, that the film got a post-credit scene. The post-credit scene showed Baba Yaga, the fictional witch from folklore, bartering with Koschei the Deathless, a minor villain from a story in the comics called Darkness Calls. Her claim was that if Koschei killed Hellboy for her, Baba would grant his greatest wish, to die. She didn't have to make good on that promise though, because the horrible script, CGI, and pacing killed the entire franchise, and I don't expect another Hellboy film for years, and it really bums me out. And that is about it for comic book films with secret scenes that led to nowhere, but that doesn't mean that those are the only ones. There's some other ones that are out there, but I think that a lot of those projects still have a hope of having a sequel introduced or those characters introduced in due time. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Remember to like and subscribe and do all that other crap that YouTubers ask you to do. This has been Nick from Key Issues. Thanks again, and remember the motto, secret scenes over everything, or something. I don't know.